discussion. The reason that I asked John and Mike to join us is, once again, it's because of their pretty significant experience with these different certifying organizations. So really quickly, I'm going to ask John to introduce yourself and tell us which courses you've taken so far, and then we'll come back and get into some of the details.
Sure. Thank you. John Peltier. I am a decade plus in product management and now product marketing. I have gone through the pragmatic courses, the AIPMN, Certified Product Manager, Certified Product Marketing Manager, as well as Quartz Open. So I have gotten all three of those.
Excellent. And Mike Madison, welcome. Let's tell us about your background.
Sure. Good morning. So yeah, I've been in product management roles for about 13 years. And what you'll hear from me today is some perspective on, I started out as a 24-year-old product manager, the only product manager reporting to a CEO trying to launch a brand new product, learning on the job and going through a career that has now involved executive roles, hiring different product managers. And so specifically, I have the AIPMN certification. I learned very early on through it's called Zigzag Marketing at the time. It's now called Proficience, John Mansour's program. And I've also been through the Scrum Alliance Certified Scrum Product Owner certification. The groups I've worked with have regularly gone back to the pragmatic framework. I've never been through the pragmatic framework training itself, but it's something that we lean heavily on to make sure that we're covering all of the core pieces of what product management should be doing as a function. And then while AHA is actually, as Jason mentioned, I worked as a customer success manager for AHA for a time, and AHA now offers some certification training. It's a fairly new program, and as an employee there were very specific things that we focused on around the product management process and where it connects with engineering. So that'll be a lot of the perspective I try to share today.
All right, great. Well, thank you. Thanks, welcome, guys. And so if at any point, I'm going to jump into the participants panel real quick, and I'm going to lower all the hands that we've got so far, and kind of reset those for a moment. But if at any point you want to jump in with a question or have an insight that you'd like to share, please pop that hand up, and I will get to everybody as we go through today's session. I don't think we're going to have breakouts like we normally do. It's going to be more of a discussion. So, but I do want to start with you, John. As I look at Pragmatic Institute, AIPMN via the 280 group, and some of the other things that you've seen around the industry. Could you tell us a little bit, as you look at primarily the Pragmatic Institute and the AIPMN certification, how would you describe the differences between those two certifications?
Good question. The way I have always thought about that is, and both of these are 5+ years ago in my background. But in both, the main difference that I found was that pragmatic was, I'm going to sound like I'm a cliche, but pragmatic was actually very, very boots on the ground, kind of practical, applicable. There were frameworks included and some studies and grids and things like that. But it was a lot of work that I could walk out of the training with and apply the following day. AIPMN, I call it more MBA-like. It was a little more on a little more textbook, a little more abstract, and a little bit less on what am I going to do when I get back to the office. So I think for me, that's the primary difference there.
Okay, great. And if I switch over to you, Mike, as you think about that, and especially that AIPMN, if you could go a little bit deeper maybe and talk about your experience with the AIPMN certification, maybe compare that to something more like the Scrum Alliance and the Certified Scrum Manager.
Sure. So I think that there's a fairly clear difference between those two programs. As John mentioned, AIPMN tends to be more that MBA-like, higher level view. I would probably AIPMN was the first certification program that I went through, and I was about 2 years into my career at that point. If I had it to do over again, I would have swapped those. I would have done the Certified Scrum Product Owner earlier on, because it would have just fit a little bit better with the more tactical execution with the engineering teams. What I tend to see is and some of this depends on how you're coming into product, but as a new product manager who already had somewhat of a technical background, it was helpful, but didn't have a lot of business background for working with development teams. Most of the work I was doing early on in my career was more focused on the agile process, the working very closely in tactical execution with teams, user story documentation, more low-level prioritization and estimation with teams. That's how I would classify the Scrum Alliance certification, is in that much more of the iterative agile cycle and the product owner role in that context. The AIPMN is more focused on sort of helping you to move from that early product manager to more senior product manager mindset. Kind of that let's start to break out of just the tactical execution and get more into the higher level planning. And then the product marketing certification that AIPMN offered as well started to get more into some of the go-to-market thinking. So beyond just what we think of as the how and the engineering execution, but making sure that your customers and the internal business are all prepared for what you're delivering. So you have a well-rounded delivery.
Gotcha. So to summarize what I think you were just kind of conveying is you felt like the product owner certification and the training that went with it was very helpful earlier, and it would have been more helpful earlier in the process for you as you were getting into the nitty gritty and the tactical product management, product ownership work that you needed to do. And then the education that you got in the AIPMN courses related. I think you took those through the 280 group. Is that correct? Or did you have AIPMN courses?
I did it through the 280 group.
Okay. So, but those courses really helped you focus up on the bigger business picture and thinking about the longer term and the more strategic view of the product.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. And then, John, it sounds like you kind of had a little bit of a similar perspective as I summarized those, and that the Pragmatic Institute course gave you the tools to be a strong product manager, or was a framework that you could rely on as a product manager. And the AIPMN work, would you agree that it had you looking a little bit up more towards the strategic view of the long-term business and outside of just the product world?
I would agree with that. The only difference I would say is that Pragmatic was a little bit less focused on whether it was Agile or Scrum or the specific development approach. It was more applicable across the board. But yes, that is fair.
Great. And so, Mike, if you would please talk for a moment. One of the big questions that people ask a lot when they're asking about certifications is, how is this going to impact my career? Is it going to have an impact on my career, and what's that impact going to look like? What's your experience been?
Sure. So I think it's very context dependent on where you are in your career and where you're moving from. So for me, I did my MBA straight after undergrad, went into a product management role very early on. And so I think that the certification helped me grow my compensation a little bit faster. It helped me move into more senior roles a little bit faster. But I also see that the value of the certification was great, probably from year 3, year 4, up to about years 7 or 8 in terms of experience. And beyond that, it became less and less critical because my body of work as a product manager became more important. And so I think that's how I would approach it if I were brand new, if I were starting product, as I did early in my career. For those who already have a career in UX or project management or development, then I think a certification can be helpful for making that transition and sort of proving some of that initial skill set, showing that it's a definitive interest, not just sort of a passing, well, this might be cool to make the move, but it's actually you've taken concrete steps to make that type of career shift. That's where I think the value is. But beyond a certain point of experience, then I think the value starts to trail off a little bit.
How about you, John? How's it impacted your career?
I would agree. I think that initially I came in from actually a QA background many years ago.
That's right.
And moved into a product analyst role. The benefits for me were in the 3 to 5 year range. It was more about how do I understand how do I take the experience I'm having every day and understand what the scope of the role actually should be, and use some or have some sort of authoritative context within which I could understand how much of the landscape I'd already learned and experienced. But after a certain point, yes, the job experience does sort of become more important, and you've having gone through enough launches, enough product releases, that training is reference material, and it's great to go find templates to create certain documents that you might need, artifacts, but it becomes less important after you've gone through enough cycles.
Right, and and then as a hiring manager, I've had the pleasure and the honor of hiring quite a few product managers over the year, and interviewing with potential colleagues as well. And I myself, until this last year, had not gone through any of the certification programs. I went through a program last year, later in the year. And so I didn't have that experience myself. But as I look at the material, as an almost 20-year veteran of product management in various formats, as I looked at the material that I went through as I was going through the training course that I went through, which was with Pragmatic Institute, and having reviewed the PDMA material about 15 years ago, as well as some of the AIPMN material, one of the things that I have observed in hindsight is the shortcuts that I think would have been available to me had I gone through one of those trainings sooner. Both John and Mike have spoken about how the value of the information tends to become a little bit less over time. My perspective, as I look at it later in my career, is how much more would I have done if I had had some of these specific frameworks earlier in my career. And we had a question that came in as in the survey that we sent out a couple of weeks ago. And if you didn't see that survey, it is linked on the resources page. You can take a look at the survey just under the references section. And I'd still like you to fill that survey out just to kind of understand what your experience is if you've got a few minutes today. But one of the questions that came in, I said, there are a million books out there. There are a lot of online resources, blog posts. Can't I just get a good product management education by reading books, reading blog posts, and interacting with communities like this? And I would be really interested to hear, John, Mike, and anyone else's perspective. If you'd like to raise your hand and contribute as well. I see Chuck raising his hand, and so Chuck, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question.
Yeah. So caveat, I teach product management fundamentals at General Assembly. Mm-hmm. I also took the class too, and I think. Echoing what you said, and then earlier what Mike said, where it's some shortcuts earlier on. I think the value on there is having been one of those guys who read the books, who did all these things, was a product manager who took the class. The biggest issue I had was taking theory and other people's examples and figuring out how to cycle that into a practical, how do I do this at work? When does this come in? So, part of that I think is you certainly can, but really understanding what that means practically to actually do it and when to do it is different. It's just like any other theory class. and trying to put something in practice. And I think that, the benefit of whether it's GA or Pragmatic or all of them is a lot of them just give you a framework to fall back to. As I think Mike's response about his work that he put out really kind of overshadowing that is true, because you learn how to think like a PM. And I think all of them really just teach you some tricks and practicalities to fall back to. But in the long run, as you mature as a product manager, you're going to adapt those. You're going to find those things that work for the way you think in your teams, and there'll be new frameworks you'll pull in. But the key bit is you're thinking like a PM. And a lot of these things early in your career are, well, wait a minute, I'm kind of stuck. What do I fall back on? I can't really think through what's this tool that's going to help me get there. So I think that's kind of where the differences are between the books. Other people may have better experience of taking the books and putting them into practice than I did, but I was horrible at it.
So I think that's a great point. One of the things that I'll tweak to what Jason said a minute ago, I think it's not the value of the information doesn't necessarily decrease. Maybe the value of the certification itself sort of decreases as you get more senior in your career, because more emphasis is placed on the work that you've done. But as I've come along in my career, and now I've moved into more and more senior roles, the value of the information gives me more thoughtful or more easily communicable ways of training my junior team members or coaching other executives on the team on how we should be thinking, how we should be operating. So, to the question about, can I read blog posts? Can I read these books that are out there? Yes, like the training never ends, but the purpose for that training is a little bit different. Now it's not necessarily, well, I'm getting a certification in order to get a salary bump or to help me get that next job. It's I'm learning this information so that I can be a better coach and teacher of my teams, or I can better support my executives and help them understand how to think like a product manager. Because I imagine a number of us have all been in situations where we're coaching a CEO or executive leaders, and they don't always necessarily think like a product manager. And so we've got to bring them along. So that's where I see that the value doesn't go away. It's just you use it for a different purpose.
It's a great observation, and I really like that perspective about having the framework and the language and the vocabulary to help bring your senior leaders along as well. That's a really good perspective. James Bond, I see you've got your hand up. I'd love to hear your thoughts, James.
There we go. All right. So yeah, if you're not paying attention to the chat, by the way, definitely bring the chat up. There's a lot of good stuff happening there.
Yeah.
But Jason, to specifically answer the question that you brought up about the materials that you can find online, what I have found, and to caveat this, I'm a product manager at Equifax. I'm a principal product manager. I have about 10 years experience in product, but all of my experience is in B2B companies. And it's in B2B companies in areas where the other B side is a institution that's still using waterfall and old systems and everything else like that. So when you take a look at a lot of the literature, a lot of the courses that are out there, they're just like, okay, we're going to move fast. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And not zero, I would say like a high single-digit percentage applies directly to what you're doing in your day-to-day. And so what I've found, we at Equifax do pragmatic marketing, but we had everyone come in. We sat down, it was at Equifax only, and we had to modify the course materials to make sure it made sense for what we're doing. And so a certification from that standpoint, and from making sure that your company has bought in and they're modifying and understanding the environment in which they work on, that I think that holds a lot more weight, but it makes it very narrow, right? I know the pragmatic fundamentals, but it's in a very Equifax way. I can't necessarily take that to another company that wants to move fast. So the then turnaround of that for a question that I have back out to Mike and to John is, with these certifications, there's a lot of B2C focus, there's a lot of startup focus, there's a lot of move fast focus. When you get into a large enterprise organization, do you see a value there from the certification standpoint, or how would you approach certification or someone looking to get certified if they know that they're going to be heavily in that space?
That's a good question. So I think that I'm going to pull on some of my AHA days. So while I was at AHA, I worked with a few hundred different companies of various sizes and market focuses, but most of my experience is in B2B software as well. So the thing that I would go back to is that there are certain ways of thinking, fundamentals about, ultimately you want to know, why are we doing the things that we're doing? What are we going to do to support those goals? When are we providing value to our stakeholders? And and then there's the crossover to engineering. Okay, how are we actually going to execute? So that thought process doesn't change. The way that you're communicating with your customers, the way that you go about gathering feedback, the amount of weight that an individual customer conversation carries will vary depending on whether you're talking about enterprise or talking about B2C. One of the companies I worked with was Field Edge. Field Edge was about as B2C style of a B2B company as you could get. We were working with home service contractors, so the volume of sales was much higher, as opposed to where I'm at, like right now with Acoustic, where we're selling fewer deals, but those deals are much larger. So in a higher volume context like B2C, I think you'll look more at data analysis. You're going to look more at user usability trends. You're looking for a volume of input to your roadmap rather than anecdotal evidence from individual customer conversations. The individual customer conversations can be useful from a UX perspective, because they can kind of guide you through how customers are working with your product or trying to solve workflow problems. But the priority that you put to things is going to be driven much more by the what I might think of as more mass analytics around around your product, as opposed to you're working in a B2B environment. You've got enterprise sales. You might have a single large customer that is putting a high degree of pressure on your roadmap, or a couple of large customers. So, but it all still comes back to, what are the organization's goals? What are the key initiatives or themes of work you're taking on to meet those goals? How are you going to measure success? And then who in the organization needs to be trained or needs specific resources to support what you're releasing? And then how are you communicating with your customers? That thought process is still the same. It's just, the context of it is going to be a little bit different. The way you communicate out is going to be a little different. So is that helpful? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
John, did you have any input?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just add that it's also important to remember who's paying the bills and who's paying the check. And we're in an enterprise world. You've got the difference between your buyer's needs and the things you need to have in a product for the executive to buy into it versus what the people using it every day are looking for. And that's obviously a little more complicated in certain ways, but on the other side, to Mike's point, it is a volume game and more B2C. So it's just a different mindset. And I think Pragmatic did a good job of coaching on the buyer versus user needs, and that the ways of thinking about that. I don't recall a lot of that in AIPMN, but it has been 5+ years that might be in there.
Cool, thank you.
Mike, one of the things that we talked about here a little bit over the last couple of minutes is some of the differences between B2C and B2B. And you and I, John, and I know that most of our experience, John, Mike, and mine, has been in B2B product management overall. Mike, you took the Proficients or Zigzag marketing courses, and for those of you who don't know Proficients and Zigzag, they've been a longtime sponsor of Product Camp. John couldn't be with us here today, but has been a huge supporter of Product Camp, and has really focused on the B2B aspects of product management. And I'd love, if you, are there any other comparisons or contrasting statements that you can make about the courses that you've taken with Zigzag versus the Pragmatic and AI, or the AIPMN, and then of course the Scrum Product Owner is much more tactical. But what observations did you have about those differences?
So like with Proficients, one of the things I like about Proficients is I tend to think of it as a customer first model. It really is intended to train around putting your customer first in your thought process, and that applies to both B2B or B2C. So it starts with, you're asking yourself a few different questions. Who is my customer? Who am I trying to help? What do they care about? Why do they care about it? How are they solving that problem today? And then how can we help? So the last piece is focused on us, but the rest is all focused on the customer. And that way of thinking really carries through whether you're talking about enterprise or consumer, with the caveat of keep in mind that John made a minute ago, keep in mind your buyer versus your user. But if you're thinking through who has specific problems, if you define your different personas in that model well, then you should wrap up, you should cover off both the buyer as well as the user in that thinking. So I think there's some of that in the AIPMN. There's some of the persona modeling. You get that in both Proficients and AIPMN. Not so much in Certified Scrum Product Owner. I think there's a little bit in the Scrum Alliance one, just on general personas, but it's much more of the tactical framework there. John, anything you?
No, nothing to add on that. I am. You've got more Proficients than I do.
Okay.
There's a huge variety of different courses available. As I look at the survey that we put out there, we've got 280 Group, which does training around the AIPMN certification. Pragmatic Institute, by the way, on the survey, Pragmatic Institute clearly had the greatest penetration of the people who responded to the survey. It was not a particularly scientific audience. It was, I didn't get a whole lot of demographic data to segment it by, but just of the survey respondents, Pragmatic Institute had the highest penetration. They've done a great job of marketing their organization and getting out there and conducting, trainings at the institutional level as well. We did have a few from Proficients, quite a bit from the Scrum Alliance, and a few SAFE certifications, which I don't know if you're not familiar with that one. That's the Scaled Agile framework for enterprise. Let's see, there were a couple of PDMA respondents as well, and we didn't talk about that one very much. The Product Development Management Association, I think, John, I think you did that one as well, if I'm not mistaken. They're a very academic focus on new product development, and you had an observation about that one too, didn't you, John?
What was you're talking about the PDMA?
Yeah,
I did not go through that.
Okay, I thought you did.
No, I went to one of their events one time, but no.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and I've been to quite a few of their events, and we did have a good partnership with the Atlanta chapter or the Georgia PDMA with Product Camp for many years, and they've kind of gotten very quiet over the last a few years. They're starting to spin back up now, but the PDMA focuses very much, heavily on manufacturing type product management, new product development for physical goods, consumer products, and engineering focused, physical engineering focused type products, and takes a very academic approach. And by the way, as I said, the Georgia PDMA is starting to spin up some webinars and some monthly events. And I try to get the word out about them when I see them in time to do so. But those are generally very high quality academic events. They tend to have speakers from major universities who are doing research who are actively conducting scientific research into product development processes and efficiency. It does tend to be more physical related, but they also tend to provide a lot of really interesting insights. So if you get a chance to attend some of their events, I do recommend them. If you're in a software space, I don't know how much the certification would benefit you. I didn't have any survey respondents say that they actually had that one, but I did see a few that said they had taken some courses. I'm looking back through here. Nope, I do have one that has it. Let's see, who was that? They did not leave a name, so I cannot tell you. I can't see if we got them here. If you did have a PDMA certification, I'd love. Charlie, you got your hand up. What can I do?
So I had a couple comments about this because I wanted to I've just over my past couple of 20 years of working in product is there a couple of observations. One is I think it really depends on the role that you're in and where you want to go. So I did pragmatic back in the 2000s. I did go to PDMA meetings, and Jason, you nailed it on the head. The reason I enjoyed they're very methodical, but it's all around production stuff. And my background, and probably a lot of us are in software development and software and technical development, technical product management. So they were putting out widgets, and my was not putting out widgets. So, but still good theory to have. I did do. I'm in the middle of the AIPMN CIL, the Certified Innovation Leader. I've completed the training. I just haven't done. I haven't taken the test yet. So I need to do that, but I just finished that up. And the note that John just put in there about, and I also did my CSPO a few years ago, and this isn't a brag list. This is just, I did these at times in my career when I needed to do those things. Like at the time I did my CSPO, I'd been laid off and I was looking for things to do. And I went to Leading Agile, a buddy of mine who runs that, and he got me into the CSPO course. I took the CSPO course, and then it led to a job managing product owners. So, I think Mike's right about, like, if you're on a trajectory, at some point certifications aren't going to help. But if you're in a position where you're either been laid off or you want to make that change, I think the certifications are good, especially if you want to go focus on, maybe you want to be a product owner or you want to be into an agile development. And then now with the CIL, now that I'm, in my career and been in a position for 2.5 years, the CIL with AIPMN is much more business focused and not so much tactical, which has been kind of I've been on the technical or tactical side of product management and looking to get into that broader, more business strategic view. So I do believe that it varies on where you're at in your career. There's no one answer for it, but I also wanted to finish that up. Chuck's note about theory. Rarely do any of these classes really teach you about the obstacles that you'll face. It's all theory and it's all practice. It's good in theory, but practice is everything. That you can take those things, but then your organization is going to practice it however the hell they want to, or they're going to reject how you want to practice it, or you're going to run into development issues or things like that. But it is a good foundation to have no matter what certification you have. So just some thoughts.
Yep. I want, and you led to a really good point. You mentioned with AIPMN, you've gone through the CIL training. You haven't yet taken the test for the certification. And we've been talking a lot today about the certifications, and the certifications are kind of a finish line certificate to say, yes, I've done this, I've taken a test. I can tell you from my experience, the Pragmatic Institute test that I took at the end of the certification course was not a difficult test. It was, and I don't know how that compares to the proficiency or the AIPMN tests in terms of were they actually challenging tests that really pushed you, or were they kind of a finish line at the end of a course? Love your thoughts on those. Charlie, you haven't taken the test yet, but Mike and John, you've both taken some of the tests, and some others may have. What was your comparative experience on the actual tests themselves?
I'll jump in on that. I think for me, the AIPMN was a challenging test because it was looking for recall of some of those frameworks and MBA style material. So I remember, again, this is going back, but I remember having to put in a handful of nights and hours to make sure that I had all that in my brain and was able to go through it. I found that Pragmatic's actual test was a bit easier because it was right after the end of the course, and it was more just making sure that you remember the key concepts. It wasn't difficult.
Yeah, largely almost as though making sure that you sat through the whole course.
Pretty much, yeah.
Paid attention.
You got it.
Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yep. Yeah, I'd say Proficience and the Scrum Alliance certifications are much more. Were you here for the course? Usually you went to a workshop for a day or two. After you sat through the workshop, the workshop was teaching the test. But the AIPMN, I actually took as an online test, but it was closed book. It was much more, like John said, it was much more challenging, much more recall of concepts and frameworks, and a little bit more application as well. I think that there were some situational questions in there as well, which was good. So yeah, and like I say, I haven't gone through the Pragmatic test, but I still go back to Pragmatic quite often for just making sure that we're covering all the boxes as a team.
Great. So thanks, guys. And so we've got a few people who have, I see, first of all, let me switch over here, and Damon, you've got your hand up. Why don't you come off mute and let us know what's on your mind?
Yeah, so I would love to get some feedback from hiring managers who actually hired because of the cert. So I would agree with like the feedback here that, as someone who's kind of building up their product career, certainly helpful, certainly shows like investment of like time and resource. But I think for those of us who are looking to break into product as a hiring manager, in what kind of situations did the certificate actually make a difference for you and you hired the person because they had a certificate?
Well, let me start, and then I'd be interested to hear some other thoughts from some of the hiring managers on here. And I see Jeff Durnovich. I know Jeff and I have worked together, and he's the head of product over at Lease Query right now. But my personal perception, Damon, has been a little complex. So I've certainly seen colleagues and employees that I've hired that come in and use a framework that they've learned and bring a lot of value to the organization by using it. And so when I see those certifications on a resume in an interview process, I dig into them to understand, is this a person who checked the box with a certification, or did they actually take that knowledge and integrate it and synthesize it, and can they use it? It becomes a factor that I consider, and it does kind of, for me, put them out as someone who's invested time and money in their career. I have correlated product managers who have these certifications. I've seen a correlation with success and focus. I don't think it's 100% accurate. And so it's not a must-have filter for me at all, but I do tend to look at them favorably as someone who's making an investment and being thoughtful. Jeff, I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I'll caveat by saying, and Jason probably remembers this, in general, I have viewed certifications really sort of negatively. And I'll say just being honest, right? And most of it's because for me, I'm a hands-on sort of do-it learner. And so the sitting in the classroom part and hearing, right, that some of the trainings really aren't a what do you do when you go back to the office? It's like the MBA style, right, education. I've just personally never found that to be something that I'm looking for. And so therefore I want to hire people, right, who have it. I will say that Mike's comment earlier is probably one of the more convincing arguments for doing some of it, which I really appreciated, which was the value in having some of that education is as a foundation to help right, other senior leaders, your CEO, et cetera, to understand when there's questions about the process, the decisions, or the output. So I've been in a couple successive positions now where the leadership didn't really understand software product management. And there was a level of, okay, I know you've done this, but tell me why. And I think it would have helped me in a couple of places to be able to say, okay, hold on, there's this framework. Let me walk you through it, instead of just, this is my experience, right? Like I've been doing this for 15 years. Can you just like, trust me, I know what to do, right? You're not going to ask your sales leader to explain the methodology. You're going to let them, right, ask people to make calls and so on and so forth. But it is a little bit different. So that said, I think for Damon, for your specific question, and I heard a specific part of it, which is sort of breaking into product management, right? So to me, that is a situation where it signals to me that someone is really interested and serious about making the change. So I think, and actually on my team now, I have accountants, right? So I have people who have been in public accounting or private accounting for 20 years who are experts in accounting, who are helping us to understand the products, the compliance, the things we have to have. And they don't want to become product managers, but there's some level of training and there's some level of understanding that they need. But at the same time, I have one of them who I think really does want to become a product manager. And so it's now I'm weighing this balance of how do I just give him experience with what would it look like to take a certification. And so if you're looking to break into product management somewhere, as I've mentored some folks over the years, right, in trying to make that change, I've focused on two things, right? One is it's the hands-on experience, right? So as much as you can get into the closest thing to what you want to do at your current company before you look to jump, right? Like that's the best thing, because it's all about the story you tell to the recruiter or to that next company that says, hey, I know my title is project manager, but here's what I've really been doing, and I want to do more of that. And so I think the second thing would be a certification or some sort of a training. To me, just signals, hey, I really want to double down. Like I really want to do this. And so I would view that, very much as a positive. But I have never looked at someone's resume, seen a certification, and said, right, yep, I have to talk to them. It's just right. It's all about the other experience and networking and things like that.
So I've got a
Jason, I had a question. If anybody throw it out there, have the schools caught up with product management yet? We're talking about certifications, but most of these certifications are pretty light. As someone who's been out of school for a bit, just curious if they are there majors? There's probably not degrees in it, but are there like majors or focuses in business school on product, or how is that working as well? And would that be an impact if you had a product management major and a business degree on a resume, or people are starting to see that? So I'm just curious about that as well.
There are definitely a few. There are a few schools that that now have product management courses specifically. Most of them are appearing at the graduate level as part of master's program, MBA programs, where there'll be a course or two in product management that I've seen. Now, I think I can't remember who it is. I think it might be Cornell. One of the more prestigious schools actually now has a Master's of Science in Product Management master's degree program available. It's a fairly prestigious school. I saw the
Carnegie
other
Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon.
Yep.
It's
Carnegie
Mellon.
Mellon. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep. Great. There we go. Thanks, guys.
So it's
And,
starting to become like a little bit more prevalent, and they're training in schools now. That's good.
It is.
The one thing I'll add to that, so I went to Georgia College in Milledgeville for my undergrad in information systems, my MBA, and I've got a master's in information systems. And the thing that I would look for in a business school program that doesn't necessarily have a specific product management degree is look to see if they have any strategic management courses as a capstone inside of a technical degree like information systems. That was probably the best all around bring it together type of training and course that I saw that really helped kind of prepare me to go straight into product management basically a year out of my undergrad.
Great.
And
So real quickly, before I need to, I've got a couple of hands up, but before we go, John's got to drop here in just a second to head to another meeting. So I wanted to invite John Peltier to give us any parting thoughts that he's got, and then we'll switch back over. James has a question and Bob has a question or comment as well. I want to get to you guys, and we'll circle back around here in just a moment. So John, take it away before you head out the door.
Appreciate that. Thank you for letting me participate, by the way. I think my main thought, I added this late in the chat, is that we've already talked about 8 or 9 vendors. There's a perpetual fire hose, as I call it, of product management techniques and information. It is easy to succumb to that and think, oh, I've got to learn just the next framework and that'll make me more effective. At some point, just pick your sources, whichever ones resonate with you, learn it and go and act and implement. That has been the thing that moves someone forward faster over time than, hey, maybe if I get product school and add it on top of AIPMN, add it on top of Pragmatic. No, stop. Just get the experience along with whichever frameworks you learn. That's the major thing I would take away.
Thanks, John. Thanks so much for participating and joining us today. And I will talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
James, you have your hand up there.
Yeah, I don't want to follow John's great wisdom. How do I top that? Okay.
Okay.
So no, I'm really happy Jeff went first because I have a background in technology where your learning was an O'Reilly book, a computer, and hours, right? That's your certification. And then I'm not blasting any current technology certifications, but that's what everyone trained up on. What I will say is I've been a hiring manager at Equifax. I'm a hiring manager at previous companies as well. Certifications have never been a negative, or a lack of certification has never been a negative quality. It's always been an additive. But what I would say is a number of people that I've worked with and myself have a little bit of a bias. I'm not pushing any specific programs, but this is just where the bias happens. An online certification like Scrum Alliance or Pragmatic, if you did a Pragmatic through your work, didn't hold as much weight as, say, something like a General Assembly or something where you had to be in class, you had to work with other people, create projects through and through. So if it was just a fire hose of information and then you pass the test versus something where we knew this course study involved a lot of back and forth, we'd always weigh heavier, say, hey, the initiative was on that General Assembly type class. But again, in neither situation was this saying, oh, well, you only have a certified Scrum product manager, product owner degree, so therefore we're not looking at you. It was never a deciding criteria. I've never been in a company from the smallest startups all the way up to Equifax where that has been. So that's my quick answer.
Yeah, I would second that, James. So thank you, Bob.
Yeah, so building off of Damon's question, there was a comment over in the chat from Jerry about more the front side of the input process of this. And oftentimes what I'll see is there's a posting and it'll say a particular certification is preferred, right? And so what is the role here with the search bots and the talent acquisition folks, and they see that you don't have the certification and you don't even get into the game to compete for a position?
So I really, and this might say something about my career path, but so I've been in 5 different product management roles, and I've turned down a number of other product management roles. But what I found in applying is that I rarely see certification as a programmatic box. I don't see a lot of questions on application forms that ask you to say, do you have a certification, yes or no, or do you have this type of certification, yes or no. I think that the general rule that I would follow, and I'd encourage anybody else to follow, is pay very little attention to the posted requirements because they usually aren't meaningful. It's this job requires 10 years experience. You only have 8, apply. Like, it never hurts to apply, because the body of your work, and not 8 years in a startup startup or 8 years with a couple of different startups are probably going to mean a lot different to me than, you know, if you spent 10 or 12 years at an enterprise where your roles may be more focused, or, you know, depending on what I'm looking for, obviously. But you know, not every experience is created equally. And so if you can tell a good story about your career, about what you've achieved, I think that still carries through with a lot of hiring managers. And yeah, there are probably some out there that, you know, not to name too many names, but, you know, like I think Home Depot is a high volume product management hiring company here in Atlanta. You know, there are some others out there that that probably come to mind, like Dropbox. I think if anybody's looked at LinkedIn recently, Dropbox has a ton of postings. You know, companies like that probably have more of an algorithm looking at your resume. You're probably going to get a lot of rejections on those, no matter what you have. But if you have an opportunity for a more personal connection with a recruiter, or you know, with a staffing agency or a hiring manager, then I think it's a lot less important at that point. Like you know, I think it's a lot more negotiable about what your experience is and what the actual requirements for the job are. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it does. I just, with more and more kind of an increasing reliance upon bots, it feels like that's an easy characteristic that you put in the algorithm. And when it's not met, qualified candidates are really invisible to the hiring manager. They don't even become visible. So it's definitely a hurdle to get past that.
I suppose, you know, this goes to the type of environment you want to work in. And I've got a bit of a bias myself on the types of environments I like to go to, but I figure that if I get screened out by a bot, maybe that's a sign I probably didn't want to work there anyway. You know, because that's probably a sign. I've never wanted to be in an environment where I was just a number, especially as a product manager. It's such a strategic role. If I'm going to be one of several dozen product managers and I don't have an opportunity to have strategic input or to influence roadmap, like, then I'm just sort of working as a feature guy, and that's not, you know, particularly at this stage of my career, that's not a role that's super rewarding to me. So for the other people for the other hiring managers on the call, I guess that would be, you know, take some advice from that. Think about how you do outreach to candidates. I've actually found the most success when hiring people coming from I look on LinkedIn, I look for good people who either are interested, who have shown interest in product management, or who have done product management adjacent roles. If I'm looking for a junior PM, if I'm looking for a more senior person, you know, I'm doing that direct outreach. I'm going to find maybe 3, 4, 5 good people to talk with and have interviews with. And usually I get good, fast success in hiring that way. You know, I don't like Indeed.com. I said it in the chat because I get hundreds of applications. I think one time I got a person who worked in trucking and transportation, who had a Waffle House background. You know, all respect to people who are trying to come up, but they basically did not look at what job they were applying for at all. So, you know, I don't like those high volume, you know, low screening services. You know, the smaller outreach, more personal connection to me goes a lot further.
I have, and just to add on to that, and it's a really good point, Bob. I haven't seen a ton of evidence that in product management roles, that is a major prevalent screening criteria yet. I'm not saying that won't change. I think it would certainly, to your point, it's a very easy thing for someone to drop in as a filtering criteria with these bots. It's very easy. I haven't seen a ton of evidence that that's actually happening. The only role that I can recall seeing that I knew that it was very explicitly a factor was 15 years ago, I think, maybe 12 years ago. I applied for a role with IHG that was specifically calling out, we prefer someone with AIPM or PDMA certification. I later found out that a lot of that was because they were developing a product management practice and didn't have the fundamental practice. They were looking for someone to come in to bring a framework to help them learn how to do a kind of a new, a modern version of product management there at IHG. So hopefully that's helpful. We're about to run out of time. I see Chuck's got his hands up, and I'm going to get over to you in just a second, Chuck, but I want to make sure that everybody, please do hit the survey. It's on the resources page. I just pasted it into the chat. Please fill out the survey before you leave today. There is a lot of discussion here. I'd love you to carry this discussion over to LinkedIn. If you haven't joined the LinkedIn group, it's at productcoffee.com/groups or /group singular, productcoffee.com/group. There's also a link on the resources page. Join that group and let's continue this conversation. I know, Dhruv, you had a question really wanting some reference and some material to see if anyone had taken the product school certification course. I was going to try to get John to talk about that for a minute, but we ran out of time. But I think that's a good question for the group as well. I don't personally know anyone who's been through that course. We may get, if John can stick around after we get to Chuck, we might be able to get him to talk a little bit about how the course is structured and give a little bit of insight. But I want to thank everybody for coming today. We're going to stick around for a few more minutes for those who can hang on a couple of extra minutes, and looking forward to continuing this conversation on LinkedIn. But Chuck, take it away, sir. And thanks again, Mike. Thanks for coming today.
Great stuff from the guys. I'll keep this quick. So I think a lot of companies have hit the agile stage of product management in that they all say they're doing product management, but nobody really knows what the hell they're doing. So you're seeing a lot of things come in for that. Generally, it's been my experience when people are asking for certs, it's either because, like Jason said, they're looking for somebody to bring practice in, or it's somebody from the hiring manager who's not super clear on product management, so they're kind of doing their best to do some screening. But just like a lot of agile certificates, nearly everybody I've ever talked to says they will value actual experience and doing of the thing, even if it's been more limited than just having a cert and, no experience whatsoever, not even doing stuff on the side. So that would be the big pays. And then getting around the bots as somebody who's job seeking for a little while, that's always the key thing. And the best thing I can say is also the suckiest thing I can say, which is find a person on LinkedIn. Reach into them. I am not a marketing guy. I hate cold emailing, but I would reach out to a PM there and say, hey, you have 5 minutes to tell me what product is like at your company. Who can I talk to? Do you know the hiring manager? In large companies, they're going to shove you off to the hiring manager. There's nothing they can do, but it'll also give you a sense of what they know and what they don't know, so you can kind of decide if it's the sort of environment you need. And then lastly, product school. Yeah, product school, from what I hear, is very general assembly-ish with a very strong focus on the Silicon Valley ecosystem. It's where a lot of their PMs come in. I cannot speak to the quality of their courses. I don't know nobody's take them. I do say they are great at marketing. So a lot of the stuff they post online is worth watching. Some good stuff there coming out from there. Like I said, I'm biased toward General Assembly, but that's just me. But I will also say General Assembly certificate is not going to get you a job any more than a pragmatic marketing will get you a job. It's really about you trying to improve your skills so you can communicate like a PM when you get into those interviews and doing those things. And to Spiel, thank you. This has been a very great session. Thanks, John and everybody.
Thanks for being here, Chuck, and I appreciate your contributions as well. John Harmer, you are an instructor at Product School. Can you tell us a little bit about how that course is structured and some of the things that people who are looking at that course should know?
Yeah, sure. So it's like an 8-week course, either like 2 nights a week or 2 sessions on a Saturday, 5 hours, I think, of content per class. They have 3 different certifications. There's the regular PMC, product management certification, I guess. There's a product leader certification. That's the class I'm teaching right now. And then there's a third one that I can't remember the name of. The PMC has had the most effort put into it. The content is pretty good. Your experience will depend on the instructor that you get. As Chuck was saying, the reason that these guys are amazing at marketing, the reason I'm an instructor is because I work at Google, not because of anything else necessarily. I think I happen to do a good job, but they didn't hire me because I was a good instructor. They hired me because they could put Google on their website, right? So your instructor will definitely affect the quality of the education you get. But I think, it's also relatively expensive. It's like $4,000 something for each of these courses. So if your company's paying for it, it's a good set of frameworks. They do design thinking, product strategy, experimentation, product market fit, stakeholder management, product marketing, getting buy-in and landing a product management job are the 8 weeks of that PMC. And each morning and afternoon or Tuesday and Thursday, there's like exercises, there's stuff you do, you create artifacts. They force you to go through the effort of making the thing that you're talking about. So it's not just listening, it's actually doing. And I think that's very valuable. And the other point of doing the things is then you have like an asset to use in your interviews and stuff like that. It's like, look, here's a customer journey map that I made for this thing. And I think that can be kind of useful. That being said, you'd probably, unless you have no experience whatsoever, any of these things I think are good for baseline experience. Getting into product management from zero. Other than that, I would suggest pick a side hustle, find a product management group within the company that you're in and offer to help them. Like find a way to do the thing with someone who will then give you real-time feedback as part of the process. There are some companies that are starting to do that with coaching, like Classes Plus coaching, but those are less common at this point. So like get out there and do it somehow and get somebody to give you feedback is the best advice.
Thanks so much, John. And thanks so much, Chuck, for kind of giving us your views on those. I had hoped that Steve Johnson could talk a little bit more about Quartz Open, but he had to leave earlier as well. That being said, as I think about landing the plane here, one of the big observations that I think I've heard today, and my experience has me agreeing with, is that nothing trumps experience. The courses behind the certifications that you see can help accelerate your success as a product manager. So the coursework, the education, coupled with experience can be a winning combination, but nothing trumps experience. All right. So thanks everyone for joining. I am really glad. This has been a great conversation. I love that we went over with a lot of passionate discussion, and we will see you back here next week for the art of the impossible, or the art of the possible, whichever way you want to go with it, but preventing design thinking failures. And hope to see you all back here. Have a great week, and thanks for coming. Bye.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone.